million youth out of work. Spain has 21% unemployment. That's 5 million jobless. And what about crime? Britain's violent crime record is worse than any other country in the European Union. The UN itself found that the crime rate in England is worse than in America, and both make the crime rate in Libya look almost non-existent. Libya ranks 61 in the world in their incarceration rate. Russia is number 2. The United States of America is number 1. Can you lecture Muammar Gaddafi and call him a madman? No, shut up and listen. I'm not here for applause. Excuse me. It's disturbing. I'm asking a question. Can you lecture Muammar Gaddafi and call him a madman? When if the leader of a country is mad, would not that be reflected in the citizens of that country? In the crime of rape? Sweden, Britain, Belgium, Norway, Israel, Denmark, Spain, France, Russia, Canada, Japan, and Germany all lead Libya. If he has lost the moral right to lead his people, what about you? What about homelessness? The rate in Britain is nearing 8%. In France, they estimate that 200,000 people live on the streets. In America, there are nearly a million living under bridges, homeless. We save America for last because America started all this. You are the one that called for such action, and you maneuvered this resolution 1973 through the Security Council and fought for it and were the proudest when it passed. You are the one that called for Gaddafi to step down and leave his country, and you are the first to say that he has lost the moral right to lead Libya, and you are the first to call for his assassination. Well, America, you are hemorrhaging jobs. Nearly 8 million jobs were lost in this latest recession. America now has 15 million unemployed, and when you add to that the underemployed, it comes to nearly 20 million Americans. 44 million Americans now live below the poverty level, and that is rising. A full 1/3 of American families tasted poverty for at least a couple of months last year. That's 100 million Americans. And the number of households collecting emergency food aid is now nearing 6 million. Approximately 1 in 8 American people are using food stamps. 3 million U.S. properties went into foreclosure in 2010 alone, a record high. And the number of families in homeless shelters or forced to live with extended family or friends is nearing 1 million. 50 million Americans have no health insurance, and that's 17% of the total U.S. population. 68 adults in America die each day in the U.S. due to the lack of health insurance. And what about your veterans, America? Those whom you send to fight your unjust wars. How do they fare when they return home? The Pentagon says that 1 in 5 American soldiers are returning from the war zones with some form of traumatic brain injury. Still others suffer emotional trauma. About 130,000 veterans become homeless each year in the United States, and more than half are black and Hispanic. The Veterans Administration estimates that 107,000 veterans are homeless on any given night. Suicide rates, divorce, and drug dependency are alarmingly high and worsening among America's veterans. Your infrastructure is even worse off than your citizens. A full 1/4 of the nation's bridges are structurally dangerous. 7 billion gallons of clean water leak out of your crumbling pipes every day, while billions of gallons of raw sewage pours into your lakes and rivers. According to your engineers, it will take $2.2 trillion to fix this problem. Your record, America, stinks in the nostrils of God. You who, in the name of humanitarian efforts, want to save the population of Libya, save them from whom and from what? How many Libyans are living in poverty? What's the crime rate in Libyan society in comparison to you who condemn Muammar Gaddafi? How many homes has he built for his people? How many of his people are living under bridges? No Libyan lives in poverty. Not one. The crime rate in Libyan society is nothing in comparison to those of you who condemn him and his rule of Libya. He has built hundreds of thousands and into the millions of homes for his people. No Libyan is homeless. No Libyan is living under a bridge. Why are you angry with him? What has he done to bring down on him the wrath of the West? The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to me, the 3 most hated of men are: 1, a rich man who gives away his wealth to the poor, a wise man who shares his knowledge with the ignorant, and the man to whom the Holy Quran is revealed. Why do you hate Gaddafi? Does he share the wealth of Libya with the poor? Well, if he does, and he does, doesn't that make you, America, look bad? You are the richest nation on the earth, and you've got 44 million people living in poverty, bread lines, food stamps, children suffering in America, but you want to talk to Gaddafi about humanitarian concerns? Gaddafi believes that economic democracy can only be achieved when the GDP of a country benefits all its citizens and when the country's wealth is dispersed to every single citizen. One journalist who lived in Libya wrote of the accomplishments Libya has made under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi. This journalist is Brother Gerald A. Pereira from Guyana. Listen to what he says and see if you can defeat the truth of what he has said. Number 1, Gaddafi nationalized Libya's vast oil resources and used his influence within OPEC to negotiate fairer prices for oil-producing countries. 2, Gaddafi used the oil revenue to build schools, hospitals, universities, and infrastructure. 3, he raised the literacy rate from 20% when he became the leader, and now it is 83%. Libya has one of the finest healthcare systems in the third world. All people have access to doctors, hospitals, clinics, and medicines free of charge. If a Libyan needs surgery that is unavailable in Libya, funding is provided for that surgery to be carried out overseas. He raised the life expectancy from 44 years now to 75. Basic food items were subsidized and electricity was made available throughout the country. He spent billions on the man-made river where he brought, his engineers brought water up out of the desert. And now pipelines run from Benghazi and Tobruk almost to the door of Tunisia. This man has set up irrigation projects which were established in order to support a drive toward agricultural development and food self-sufficiency. Any Libyan who wanted to become a farmer was and still is given free use of land, a house, farm equipment, livestock, and seed. Gaddafi vowed that his own parents, who lived in a tent in the desert, would not be housed until every Libyan was housed. He fulfilled that promise. Under Gaddafi, Libya has now attained the highest standard of living in Africa. Listen to this. Money from Libya's oil revenue is deposited into the bank account of every Libyan. women have full access to education, employment, and he has enabled women to serve in the armed forces. This is most important. Gaddafi was the first and only leader in the Arab world to formally apologize for the Arab role in the trade in captured Africans. Gaddafi acknowledged that the black Africans were the true owners of Libya and proclaimed in his green book, the black race shall prevail throughout the world. Pereira writes, imperialists fear a united Africa which would completely alter the balance of power globally. The well-documented fact is that if Africa stopped the flow of all resources and raw materials to the Western nations for just 1 week, the United States and Europe would grind to a halt. Nelson Mandela, the one whom you claim you love, called Muammar Gaddafi one of the 20th century's greatest freedom fighters and insisted the eventual collapse of the apartheid system owed much to Gaddafi and Libyan support. With no justification, real justification, you put Libya under sanctions for 10 years. He couldn't buy this or that from this country or that. So he was forced to turn inward. And under sanctions, he has produced a country in which everything in it is paid for. It has no debt. Then the ultimate crime of Muammar Gaddafi was to tie the Libyan dinar to gold. Even more than Russia, China's the only one that has more gold than Libya, according to what we have read. The gold that Libya amassed shows that her country has been based on solid economic principles. But America, Europe, look at you. America is now drowning in $62 trillion of debt if you include Social Security, Medicare, and other entitlements. Well, now, media, what is your responsibility? If I know this, if others know this, if men like Wesley Clark, Attorney General, and Sister Dorothy McKinney and others speak out, if the Congress voted against giving this government more money to continue this wicked plot against Libya and the Libyan people, whether they're in Benghazi or in Tripoli, I am telling my brothers in Benghazi that the Western world does not intend to give you justice. They will use you, and in the end they will suck your blood. They have gathered like vultures, and they'll pick your blood as soon as they finish picking his. Well, media, if you know this, why don't the American people know this? It's because our media is controlled. Management of the news to support policies that are wicked. This was done in the lead up to the war in Iraq. If truth were given to the American people would never have supported these policies. You are no longer a free press, and you are doing a great disservice to the American people. And I am warning you, you will pay a price for this. Because the American people can only be lied to for so long. But it is written in both the Bible and the Quran. In the Bible it says everything that is done in the dark will come to the light. And in the Quran it says, though it be the weight of an atom hidden in a rock and buried in the earth, yet will Allah bring it forth. So your days of lying are over. Your days of deceiving people all over the world are over. Truth will come out in the end, and it will cause a revolt in the American people against all these institutions which have misused and abused their loyalty and their love for the United States of America. You don't like that Brother Gaddafi is more interested in the welfare of others and does not hoard the wealth of Libya for Libyans alone. He began to show his people why they should be concerned for their neighbors and the suffering of their fellow neighbors, whether it is in the Arab world or in Africa or in other parts of the world. He made his people through the Green Book international in their thinking. In 1999, Muammar Gaddafi decided to foster the ideas of Assadjifo, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, and Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt for a United States of Africa. This created great concern. Among who? America, England, France, Italy, Germany, Canada, all of you that have sucked the blood and continue to suck the blood of the poor and weak of this earth. What was your concern about that? If there were a United States of Africa with one central bank, with a transportation system that tied all these nations together with one language that they would adopt and as the official language of all 53 countries, with trade between the states and with those outside of America, with one great army, and they're getting a decent price on the world market for their tremendous resources, then there would never be a poor African, an uneducated African, an African living in the bush, when that African would now be able to live in a decent home, having a decent quality of life. This is what Muammar Gaddafi was doing. And the moment he started fostering the African Union as a step towards a United States of Africa, Europe and America came up with NEPAD, the new partnership for Africa's development. That was not working because the countries that you singled out for NEPAD were the strongest in Africa, and you made them promises that you really never intended to deliver. I want to quote to you from the Holy Quran in the chapter 14, verse 22. It says, "And the devil will say, when the matter is decided," you figure out who that is, "surely Allah promised you a promise of truth. And I promised you, then failed you. And I had no authority over you except that I called you and you obeyed me. So blame me not, but blame yourselves. I cannot come to your help, nor can you come to my help. I deny your associating me with Allah before. Surely for the unjust is a painful chastisement." But America and Europe came up with another scheme that Muammar Gaddafi rejected. You wanted to separate the nations of North Africa and unite them with the nations of Southern Europe into a new kind of configuration of nations. All of this to undermine and thwart his efforts to unite Africa, that Africa may come up into the world as an equal partner in world politics, world education, world economics, and world religion. Muammar Gaddafi came up with a system that suits the Libyan and African people, not your parliamentary system, not your system of so-called democracy. You, with your arrogance, think that the people in the Middle East want your democracy when the American people don't have it themselves? And what little they have, they are now losing it with the Patriot Act and the country being under national emergency since 9/11. You, America, throwing stones and hiding your hand as though you are innocent of criminal activity, and the nerve of you to put people before the International Criminal Court. How many nations, America, have you seduced to sign a document that they will never bring an American before the ICC? Is there some racism involved in who you put before the International Criminal Court with a record like yours, with a record like Israel's, with a record like those? Why don't any of you and the Israelis, for what they did in Gaza, what they did in Lebanon, why don't you bring them before the court? Because America has a veto. It'll never happen. I think there's some racism involved in this, since all the cases that you've prosecuted are Africans Why aren't any one of you before the International Criminal Court? Is this why Muammar Gaddafi, when he came to the United Nations, called the Security Council the Terror Council? Since this Security Council and this United Nation was established in 1945, you said you wanted to bring peace in the world. But there have been 65 different wars since then, and now many more are arising as we speak. Is this your work? Then why should we have a United Nations when you have failed to bring about what you said you would bring about in your charter? So has the United Nations lost its legitimate right to exist? In the park across the street from the United Nations, there's a wall with the inscription from Isaiah the prophet that reads, "They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." So your hypocrisy is engraved in granite. So when you look at it and look at the actions of the United Nations, you tell me, is that a worthy institution to continue? The preamble of the Charter of the United States Nations claims that it was being formed to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. But Brother Gaddafi said, quote, "Terrorism is not only the terrorism of Al-Qaeda. The status quo is terrorism. As for now, the Security Council is a feudal security, a feudal policy for permanent members. It protects them, and it uses it against us. Hence, it should not be called the Security Council, rather the Terror Council. Since the Security Council was established in 1945 and until now, it has not provided security for us, rather provided punishments and terror." Has the United Nations lost its legitimate right to exist? Shouldn't this institution be done away with or completely reformed? But who's got the courage? Who's got the strength? You are weak and cowardly, and you deserve what you get. America is ruled by special interests, not by the needs, rights, and interests of the American people. And you dare to say that the Arab world that is rising wants your democracy? No. They want liberty. They want justice. They want equity. They want a government that serves the needs, rights, and interests of the people. That's what they want. And this is why Muammar Gaddafi said, this is not Egypt. This is not Tunisia. This is not Bahrain. This is not that, because he has looked out for the needs, rights, and interests of the Libyan people. That does not mean to say that there's no dissatisfaction in Libya, and whether that dissatisfaction is legitimate or not. But if there is dissatisfaction, then let the Libyan people come together and sort out their problems as intelligent, civilized people should do. But it is your intervention. The American people want the same. They're angry with their government. So let me ask this question. Since you said Gaddafi is an illegitimate leader, what is the polling of the American leadership toward their leadership? What is the polling of the American people toward Congress, toward the Supreme Court, toward the executive branch and its leader, the President of the United States? 50% of Americans disapprove of Obama's job performance. Does this mean now that he's illegitimate? Is this why many Americans are saying that he will be a one-term president? 39% of the American people disapprove of the way the Supreme Court is handling its job. 70% of the American people disapprove of Congress, and 61% of the American people believe the country is on the wrong track. But according to what we understand, only 2% of the Libyan people are in rebellion against their government. Now, you mean to tell me that half of your people don't want you? And you dare to say that this man is illegitimate? What makes him illegitimate and what makes you legitimate? Is it because you have ruled the world under white supremacy? Is it because you are former power as a colonial master and a slave master? Is it because of your military might? Well, let me tell you what's about to happen to all of you. I didn't come here just to have a press conference. I came here to preach the doom of this institution. You say he's illegitimate? He kills his own people? What's your record? What's your record, America? Why are American soldiers dying in Iraq, in Afghanistan? Because the former president lied and said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, that he was an enemy, that he was going to be a threat to the security of America, that he may be connected to Al-Qaeda. So you sent these soldiers to die on the basis of a lie and then washed your hands of responsibility for killing them. How many so-called Libyans can you prove that Gaddafi killed? And how many Americans do we have on the record that your lives has caused their death and the wounding of